Officer Marcus Thompson walked slowly down the busy street near the courthouse that Tuesday morning. The sun was shining bright, and people were walking fast to get to their jobs. Marcus had been working as a police officer in this area for 3 years now. He knew every corner, every building, and most of the people who worked around here. Marcus was a tall man with short brown hair and a serious face. He always kept his uniform clean and pressed. Other officers sometimes said he was too strict, but Marcus believed he was just doing his job the right way. He thought it was important to keep the courthouse area safe and make sure only the right people were there. The courthouse was a big old building made of gray stone. It had tall columns at the front and wide steps leading up to the main door. Lawyers in expensive suits walked up and down these steps all day long. Judges, clerks, and other important people worked inside. Marcus felt proud to protect this important place. As Marcus walked his usual path, he watched everyone carefully. He looked at the way people dressed, how they walked, and whether they seemed to belong there. In his mind, he had a clear picture of what courthouse people should look like. They wore nice suits, carried leather briefcases, and walked with confidence like they owned the place. The morning was getting busier. More people were arriving for court cases that would start soon. Marcus saw the familiar faces he knew well. There was Mrs. Peterson, the court clerk with gray hair who always smiled at him. Mr. Rodriguez, a lawyer who wore glasses and carried a heavy bag full of papers. Judge Miller, an older white man who had worked there for 20 years. Marcus felt good about knowing all these people. It made him feel like he was part of something important. He believed his job was to make sure troublemakers stayed away from these good, hard-working people. Sometimes he had to ask questions when he saw someone who did not look like they belonged. The morning air was cool and fresh. Marcus could smell coffee from the small shop across the street. Workers were getting their morning drinks before starting their day. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. Marcus liked mornings like this when he could walk around and keep watch over his area. As he turned the corner near the main courthouse entrance, Marcus saw someone who made him stop and pay attention. A tall black man was walking toward the courthouse building. The man looked to be in his 50s with some gray hair at his temples. He wore a dark blue suit that looked nice but not too fancy. He carried an old leather briefcase that had some scratches on it. Marcus watched the man carefully. Something about him made Marcus feel suspicious. The man walked with confidence, like he knew where he was going. But Marcus thought there was something wrong with this picture. In his experience, most of the important people at the courthouse were white. This man did not fit what Marcus expected to see. The man's suit was nice, but it was not the expensive kind that the big lawyers wore. His shoes were clean, but they looked old and worn. His briefcase was brown leather, but it had scratches and marks that showed it had been used for many years. To Marcus, these things suggested the man might not really belong at the courthouse. Marcus had learned to trust his feelings about people. He believed he could tell when someone was up to no good just by looking at them. Right now, his instincts were telling him to be careful. This man might be planning to cause trouble or try to get into places he should not be. The black man walked steadily toward the courthouse steps. He did not look around nervously like someone who was lost or confused. He did not seem worried or scared. Instead, he looked straight ahead with a calm expression on his face. This confident attitude made Marcus even more suspicious. Marcus began walking faster to catch up with the man. He wanted to stop him before he could get inside the courthouse. Marcus felt it was his duty to protect the building and everyone inside it. If this man was planning something bad, Marcus would stop him before anything could happen. As Marcus got closer, he could see the man more clearly. The man had kind eyes and a gentle face. His hair was neat and well-groomed. He carried himself with dignity, like someone who was used to being respected. But Marcus did not notice these things. He only saw what he expected to see, someone who did not belong. The courthouse steps were wide and made of the same gray stone as the building. People walked up and down them all day long. Lawyers met their clients on these steps. Court workers took breaks outside. It was a busy public place where many important conversations happened. Marcus reached the bottom of the steps just as the black man was about to start climbing them. This was the moment Marcus had been preparing for. He stepped directly in front of the man, blocking his path to the courthouse entrance. Marcus put his hand on his belt near his radio and other equipment. This was something he did automatically when he wanted to show his authority. The black man stopped walking when Marcus stepped in front of him. He looked at Marcus with calm, patient eyes. He did not seem angry or scared. He just waited to see what Marcus wanted. His peaceful reaction surprised Marcus a little, but it did not change his mind about what he needed to do. Marcus looked the man up and down carefully. He noticed every detail of the man's appearance. The suit that was nice, but not expensive enough. The briefcase that was too old and worn. The shoes that had been polished but still showed their age. All of these things confirmed what Marcus already believed. Other people were walking around them, going about their morning business. Some people glanced over to see what was happening, but most just kept walking. Marcus felt confident that he was doing the right thing. He was protecting the courthouse and all the important people who worked there. The black man stood quietly, waiting for Marcus to speak. He kept his hands visible and did not make any sudden movements. His calm behavior was exactly what someone should do when stopped by a police officer, but Marcus interpreted this differently. He thought the man was being too calm, like he was hiding something. Marcus cleared his throat and prepared to ask his questions. He felt the weight of his badge and uniform. These things gave him the authority to stop people and ask them to explain themselves. He was ready to use that authority now. The morning sun was getting higher in the sky. More people were arriving at the courthouse for the day's business. The steps were getting busier with lawyers, clerks, and citizens who had court appointments. But Marcus was focused only on the man standing in front of him. This was the moment that would change everything, though Marcus did not know it yet. He thought he was just doing his job, protecting the courthouse from someone who might cause trouble. He had no idea that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. Marcus stepped closer to the black man and spoke in a loud, clear voice. "Excuse me, sir, I need to ask you some questions." His tone was firm and official, the way he had been trained to speak when stopping someone. The man looked at Marcus with calm eyes and nodded slightly, showing he was willing to listen. "What is your business here at the courthouse today?" Marcus asked, crossing his arms over his chest. He wanted to look strong and in control. The black man shifted his briefcase to his other hand and answered in a quiet, respectful voice. "I work here, officer. I am just going to my office like I do every morning." Marcus frowned and shook his head. He did not believe what he was hearing. In his 3 years of working this area, he had never seen this man before. Marcus knew all the important people who worked at the courthouse, and this man was definitely not one of them. "I find that hard to believe, sir. I know everyone who works in this building, and I have never seen you before." The black man remained patient and calm. He did not raise his voice or show any anger, even though Marcus was clearly doubting his word. "Officer, I understand your concern, but I really do work here. I have been coming to this building for many years." His voice was steady and kind, like someone who was used to explaining himself to people who questioned his presence. More people were walking up and down the courthouse steps now. Some of them slowed down to watch what was happening between Marcus and the black man. A few lawyers in expensive suits glanced over with curious expressions. Marcus noticed the attention they were getting, but it only made him feel more sure that he was doing the right thing. "What kind of work do you claim to do here?" Marcus asked, emphasizing the word claim to show he still did not believe the man. He pulled out a small notebook from his shirt pocket, like he was conducting an official investigation. The black man watched Marcus write something down and then answered calmly, "I am a judge, officer. I have chambers on the 3rd floor of this building." The man's voice was still respectful, but there was something in his tone that suggested he was used to being treated with more respect than this. Marcus almost laughed out loud when he heard this answer. "A judge," Marcus repeated, his voice full of disbelief. "Sir, I know all the judges who work in this building, and you are definitely not one of them." Marcus looked the man up and down again, taking in his modest suit and worn briefcase. "The judges here drive expensive cars and wear suits that cost more than most people make in a month." The black man sighed quietly, but he did not lose his patience. "Officer, I understand this may seem confusing to you, but I really am telling you the truth. My name is Judge David Washington, and I have been serving on the bench here for 15 years. Marcus wrote the name down in his notebook, but he was still not convinced. If you really are a judge, then you should have some identification to prove it. I'm going to need to see some ID before I can let you into this building. He held out his hand expectantly, waiting for the man to produce identification. Judge Washington reached slowly into his jacket pocket. He moved carefully and deliberately, keeping his hands visible at all times. This was something he had learned to do over the years when dealing with law enforcement. He pulled out a black leather wallet and opened it to show his identification. Marcus took the wallet and examined the ID card inside. It was a state identification card with the man's photo and the name David Washington, but Marcus was still not satisfied. This just shows your name and address. It does not prove you are a judge. Anyone can have an ID card made with any name on it. Judge Washington pointed to another card in his wallet. That is my courthouse identification badge, officer. It has my photo and shows that I have access to the judicial chambers. Marcus looked at the badge, which did indeed look official. It had the courthouse logo and the man's photo, along with some security features that would be hard to fake. But Marcus was still suspicious. He had made up his mind that this man did not belong here, and he was not going to change his opinion easily. These could be fake, he said, handing the wallet back to Judge Washington. I have seen fake IDs before that look very real. By now, a small crowd was beginning to form on the courthouse steps. Several court workers had come outside for their morning break and were watching the interaction with growing concern. One of them, a young clerk named Sarah, recognized Judge Washington immediately. She had worked with him many times over the past 2 years. Sarah felt her heart racing as she watched Officer Marcus continue to question Judge Washington. She knew she should say something to help, but she was nervous about interfering with a police officer. She looked around at the other people watching and saw that some of them also recognized the judge. Marcus noticed the crowd forming and felt even more confident about what he was doing. He thought the people were gathering because they were concerned about a potential security threat. Sir, I am going to need you to come with me to the security office inside the building. We need to verify your story with the head of courthouse security. Judge Washington looked at the crowd of people watching them. He saw Sarah and several other court workers he knew well. Their faces showed shock and concern about what was happening. The judge made a decision to cooperate fully with Officer Marcus, even though he could have ended this situation immediately by asserting his authority. Officer, I am happy to accompany you inside, Judge Washington said calmly. We can go directly to my chambers if you would like, and I can show you my office. He gestured toward the courthouse entrance with a dignified motion of his hand. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction. He believed he was about to expose someone who had been trying to trick him with fake identification. That sounds like a good plan. Let us go inside and get to the bottom of this. He motioned for Judge Washington to walk ahead of him toward the courthouse entrance. As they walked up the steps together, Marcus kept his hand near his radio in case he needed to call for backup. He was feeling proud of himself for catching what he believed was a potential security threat. Judge Washington walked beside him with quiet dignity, his head held high despite the embarrassing situation. Sarah and the other court workers followed at a distance, whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. They could not believe that Officer Marcus did not recognize Judge Washington, who was well known and respected throughout the courthouse. Sarah pulled out her phone and quickly sent a text message to her supervisor, warning them about what was happening. The morning sun was now shining brightly on the courthouse steps. The gray stone building looked impressive and official in the clear light. People continued to arrive for their court appointments, but many of them stopped to watch as Officer Marcus escorted Judge Washington toward the entrance. Marcus felt the eyes of all these people on him, and it made him feel important and professional. He thought they were impressed by his thorough work in protecting their courthouse. He had no idea that many of them recognized Judge Washington and were shocked by what they were seeing. As they reached the top of the steps, Judge Washington paused for a moment and looked back at the crowd of people watching them. His expression was calm but sad, like someone who had experienced this type of treatment before and hoped he would never have to experience it again. Marcus opened the heavy glass door of the courthouse and gestured for Judge Washington to enter. First. After you, sir, he said in a tone that was meant to sound polite but came across as condescending. Judge Washington nodded and walked through the doorway, carrying himself with the same dignity he had shown throughout this entire encounter. The cool air conditioning of the courthouse lobby hit them as they stepped inside. The lobby was busy, with people checking in for court appointments and going through security screening. Marcus felt confident as he prepared to expose what he believed was someone trying to gain unauthorized access to the building. But Judge Washington knew that everything was about to change in just a few minutes. The courthouse lobby was filled with the usual morning activity. People were waiting in line to go through the metal detectors, lawyers were meeting with their clients, and court workers were hurrying to start their day. The marble floors made every footstep echo through the large space, and the high ceiling gave the lobby an important, official feeling. Marcus walked beside Judge Washington toward the security checkpoint. He felt proud and confident as he approached. The security guards who worked the metal detectors every day. These guards knew Marcus well, and he was sure they would support him when he explained what was happening. "Good morning, Tom," Marcus called out to the head security guard, a friendly older man who had worked at the courthouse for 10 years. Tom looked up from checking people's bags and smiled when he saw Marcus approaching. But his smile quickly changed to a look of confusion when he saw who was walking with the officer. "Morning, Marcus," Tom replied, but his voice sounded uncertain. His eyes moved from Marcus to Judge Washington, and his expression became very serious. Tom had worked at this courthouse long enough to know every judge by sight, and he recognized Judge Washington immediately. Marcus did not notice the change in Tom's expression. He was too focused on what he believed was his important investigation. "Tom, I found this man outside claiming to be a judge who works here. He has some identification, but I think it might be fake. Can you help me verify his story?" Tom's eyes grew wide with shock. He looked at Judge Washington, who stood quietly with his hands clasped behind his back. The judge's expression was calm, but tired, like someone who had been through a long and difficult experience. Tom could not believe what he was hearing from Officer Marcus. "Marcus," Tom said slowly, "do you know who this is?" His voice was careful and measured, like he was trying not to make the situation worse. Other security guards nearby stopped what they were doing and looked over to see what was happening. They too recognized Judge Washington right away. Marcus shook his head confidently. "No, Tom, and neither do you. This man is claiming to be Judge David Washington, but I know that is not true. I need you to check your records and prove that he does not work here." Marcus pulled out his notebook again and prepared to write down whatever Tom told him. Tom felt his stomach drop. He realized that Officer Marcus had just made a terrible mistake, and now Tom had to figure out how to handle this delicate situation. Judge Washington was one of the most respected judges in the courthouse, known for his fairness and kindness to everyone who worked there. "Marcus," Tom said quietly, "this really is Judge Washington. He has been working here for 15 years. I see him every morning when he comes to work." Tom's voice was gentle but firm. He was trying to help Marcus understand his error without embarrassing him too much in front of everyone. Marcus felt confused and frustrated. He could not understand why Tom was not supporting him. "That is impossible, Tom. I know all the judges who work here, and I have never seen this man before. Are you sure you are thinking of the right person?" Other people in the lobby were starting to notice the conversation happening near the security checkpoint. Several lawyers who were waiting to go through the metal detectors recognized Judge Washington and began whispering to each other. Word was spreading quickly through the lobby that something unusual was happening. Judge Washington finally spoke up in his calm, dignified voice. "Officer, perhaps we should continue this conversation in a more private setting. I think there has been a misunderstanding that we can clear up quickly." He gestured toward the elevators, suggesting they could go to his chambers to resolve the situation. But Marcus was not ready to give up. He still believed he was right and everyone else was wrong. "No, sir. I think we should stay right here where there are witnesses. Tom, I need you to call your supervisor and have them check the employee records. I want official proof of whether this man works here or not." Tom looked helplessly at Judge Washington, who nodded slightly to show that he understood the difficulty. position Tom was in. The judge had been in situations like this before, and he knew that sometimes the best thing to do was let events play out naturally rather than force a confrontation. "Okay, Marcus," Tom said reluctantly. "I will call my supervisor." He picked up his radio and spoke quietly into it, asking his boss to come to the lobby as soon as possible. While they waited, more people gathered around to watch what was happening. Sarah, the court clerk who had witnessed the original confrontation outside, hurried into the lobby. She had been trying to find someone in authority who could help resolve the situation. When she saw that Officer Marcus was still questioning Judge Washington, she felt sick to her stomach. Sarah approached Tom carefully and whispered in his ear, "Tom, you have to do something. That is really Judge Washington, and Officer Marcus is making a huge mistake." Tom nodded and whispered back that he had already called for his supervisor. Within a few minutes, Tom's supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, arrived in the lobby. She was a no-nonsense woman who had been managing courthouse security for 8 years. As soon as she saw Judge Washington, her face went pale. She immediately understood what had happened. "What seems to be the problem here?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, though she already knew the answer. She looked at Officer Marcus, who seemed relieved to see another authority figure arrive. "Ma'am, I detained this man outside the courthouse because he was acting suspiciously. He claims to be a judge, but I believe his identification is fake. I need you to check your employee records and confirm that he does not work here." Marcus spoke with confidence, still believing he was handling the situation correctly. Mrs. Rodriguez took a deep breath. She knew she had to handle this situation very carefully. "Officer Marcus, this is indeed Judge David Washington. He has been presiding over cases in this courthouse for 15 years. He is one of our most respected judges." Marcus felt like the floor was falling out from under him. His confident expression began to crumble as the reality of his mistake started to sink in. "That cannot be right," he said weakly. "I know all the judges who work here." "Officer," Judge Washington said gently, "perhaps you and I should have a private conversation about what happened here today. I think it would be beneficial for both of us." His voice was kind and understanding without any anger or resentment. The lobby had become very quiet. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. Marcus looked around at all the faces staring at him. Some looked shocked, others looked disappointed, and a few looked angry about what they had witnessed. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Everyone, please continue with your business. We will handle this situation appropriately." She gestured for Marcus and Judge Washington to follow her to a more private area. As they walked away from the security checkpoint, Marcus felt his legs shaking. He finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had publicly humiliated a respected judge based on nothing more than his own prejudices and assumptions. Judge Washington walked beside him with the same dignity he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. Even after being treated so poorly, he maintained his composure and grace. Marcus began to realize that he was dealing with someone truly special, someone who possessed a strength of character that Marcus had never encountered before. They entered a small conference room near the lobby and Mrs. Rodriguez closed the door behind them. The room was quiet and private, away from the curious eyes of everyone in the lobby. Marcus sat down heavily in one of the chairs, his hands trembling as he tried to process what had just happened. Judge Washington remained standing, looking out, the window at the courthouse steps where this whole situation had begun less than an hour ago. When he turned back to face Marcus, his expression was serious but not unkind. "Officer Marcus," Judge Washington said quietly, "I think we need to talk about what happened here today and, more importantly, why it happened." His words were measured and thoughtful, like someone who had given this type of conversation a lot of consideration over the years. Marcus looked up at the judge, and for the first time, he really saw him. Not as a suspicious person who did not belong, but as a human being who had been treated unfairly. The weight of his actions began to settle on Marcus like a heavy blanket, and he realized that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The small conference room felt very quiet after all the noise and activity in the courthouse lobby. Marcus sat in his chair, staring down at his hands while Judge Washington stood near the window. Mrs. Rodriguez had left them alone to talk, saying she would check back in 30 minutes to see how they were doing. Marcus finally looked up at Judge Washington, and for the first time he really saw the man he had been questioning. The judge's face showed kindness mixed with sadness. His eyes held wisdom that came from years of experience dealing with difficult situations. Marcus realized he was looking at someone who deserved much more respect than he had been given. "Judge Washington," Marcus began, his voice shaky and uncertain. "I want to apologize for what happened out there. I made a terrible mistake, and I am truly sorry." The words felt inadequate for the situation, but Marcus did not know what else to say. Judge Washington nodded slowly and took a seat across from Marcus. "Officer Marcus, I appreciate your apology, but I think we need to talk about more than just what happened today. We need to discuss why it happened." The judge's voice was calm and patient, like a teacher who was about to give an important lesson. Marcus felt confused by this response. He had expected anger or demands for punishment, not an invitation to have a deeper conversation. "I am not sure I understand what you mean, Your Honor." The formal title felt strange in his mouth, since he had been treating this man like a criminal just minutes before. "Officer Marcus, in my 15 years as a judge, I have seen many cases that involve misunderstandings between people of different backgrounds. What happened today was not just a simple mistake. It was the result of assumptions you made about me based on how I looked." Judge Washington spoke gently but clearly, making sure Marcus understood every word. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He wanted to deny what the judge was saying, but deep down he knew it was true. "Your Honor, I was just doing my job. I try to keep the courthouse safe for everyone who works here." His voice lacked conviction, and even he could hear how weak his excuse sounded. "I understand that protecting this building is your job," Judge Washington replied. "But tell me honestly, would you have stopped a white man in an expensive suit and questioned him the same way you questioned me?" The judge's question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus opened his mouth to say yes, but the word would not come out. He thought about all the times he had seen people at the courthouse who he did not recognize. Had he ever stopped any of the white lawyers or judges to demand identification? Just thinking about it, he knew the answer was no. "Officer Marcus, I want you to understand something," Judge Washington continued. "This is not the first time something like this has happened to me. I have been a judge for 15 years, but I have also been a black man my entire life. I know what it feels like to be judged by my appearance rather than my character or accomplishments." Marcus felt a heavy weight settling in his chest. He was beginning to understand that his actions had been part of a much bigger problem, something that Judge Washington and other people like him faced regularly. "Your Honor, I never thought about it that way. I guess I just made assumptions without realizing it." "The problem with assumptions," Judge Washington said, "is that they can cause real harm to real people. Today you assumed I did not belong here because of how I looked. But what if your assumptions had been wrong in a different way? What if I had been a crime victim coming to court, or a family member trying to support someone during a difficult time?" Marcus had never considered these possibilities. He had been so focused on what he thought were suspicious people that he had never thought about all the innocent reasons someone might visit the courthouse. "I guess I never thought about all the different reasons people come here." Judge Washington stood up and walked back to the window. He looked out at the courthouse steps where everything had started. "Officer Marcus, I want to share something with you. When I first became a judge 15 years ago, I was one of only 3 black judges in this entire courthouse system. Even then, people sometimes questioned whether I really belonged here." Marcus listened carefully as Judge Washington continued his story. "I remember my first day on the bench. I was wearing my judicial robes and walking through the courthouse, and a security guard stopped me. He wanted to know what I was doing in the restricted area. Even in my robes, with my nameplate clearly visible, he assumed I was in the wrong place." "That must have been very frustrating," Marcus said quietly. He was starting to understand how his actions today fit into a pattern of experiences that Judge Washington had faced throughout his career. "It was frustrating," Judge Washington agreed, "but it was also educational. It taught me that I would have to work twice as hard as my colleagues to earn the same level of respect. It also taught me the importance of patience and dignity when facing prejudice. Marcus felt ashamed as he realized how Judge Washington had demonstrated those same qualities during their encounter. Even when being questioned and doubted, the judge had remained calm and respectful. "Your Honor, you handled today's situation with more grace than I deserved. I would not have been nearly as patient if someone had treated me the way I treated you." Officer Marcus getting angry would not have solved anything, Judge Washington explained. In fact, it might have made things worse. "I have learned that the best way to handle these situations is with patience and education. That is why we are having this conversation right now." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, thinking about everything Judge Washington had said. He was beginning to see his own behavior in a new light, and he did not like what he saw. "Your Honor, what can I do to make this right? I know I cannot undo what happened, but I want to do better." Judge Washington turned away from the window and looked directly at Marcus. "The fact that you are asking that question tells me there is hope for positive change. But making things right will require more than just an apology. It will require you to examine your own biases and work to overcome them." "How do I do that?" Marcus asked. He genuinely wanted to learn and improve, but he did not know where to start. "Education is the first step," Judge Washington replied. "You need to learn about the experiences of people who are different from you. You need to understand the history of discrimination and how it still affects people today. And you need to practice seeing people as individuals rather than making assumptions based on their appearance." Marcus nodded, taking mental notes of everything the judge was telling him. "Are there books I should read or classes I should take?" "There are many resources available," Judge Washington said. "But the most important thing is that you approach this learning with an open mind and a genuine desire to change. It will not be easy, and it will not happen overnight. But if you are committed to doing the work, you can become a better officer and a better person." The door to the conference room opened, and Mrs. Rodriguez looked in to check on them. "How are you two doing in here?" she asked. Her expression showed concern for both men. "We are having a very productive conversation," Judge Washington replied. "Officer Marcus and I are discussing how we can turn today's unfortunate incident into an opportunity for growth and learning." Mrs. Rodriguez looked surprised but pleased by this response. She had expected anger and demands for disciplinary action, not a calm discussion about education and improvement. "That is wonderful to hear, Your Honor. Is there anything you need from me?" "Actually, yes," Judge Washington said. "I would like to set up some regular meetings with Officer Marcus over the next few months. I think continued dialogue will be beneficial for both of us." He looked at Marcus, who nodded eagerly in agreement. Marcus felt grateful for this opportunity, even though he knew it would be challenging. "Your Honor, I would be honored to learn from you. I promise to take this seriously and work hard to become better." Judge Washington smiled for the first time since their encounter had begun. "Officer Marcus, I believe you are sincere in your desire to change. That gives me hope not just for you, but for others who might benefit from your example." As they prepared to leave the conference room, Marcus realized that this day had changed his life forever. He had started the morning thinking he was a good officer doing his job well. Now he understood that he had a lot of work to do to become the kind of person and officer he truly wanted to be. Judge Washington had given him a gift, the opportunity to learn and grow from his mistakes rather than simply being punished for them. Marcus was determined not to waste this chance. 3 months had passed since that morning when Officer Marcus Thompson made the biggest mistake of his career. The courthouse looked the same as it always had, with its gray stone walls and tall columns, but everything felt different to Marcus now. He walked the same streets and protected the same building, but he saw the world through completely different eyes. Every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, Marcus met with Judge Washington in his chambers. The judge's office was filled with law, books, framed certificates, and photos of his family. Marcus had learned that Judge Washington had 2 children who were both in college, and a wife who worked as a teacher. These personal details made the judge seem more human and helped Marcus understand how his actions had affected not just a professional, but a father and husband. During their first few meetings, Marcus had felt uncomfortable and ashamed. It was hard to sit across from someone he had treated so poorly and try to have normal conversations. But Judge Washington made it easier by focusing on learning rather than blame. He never made Marcus feel stupid or hopeless, even when discussing difficult topics about race and prejudice. "Officer Marcus," Judge Washington had said during their second meeting, "I want you to understand that what happened between us is part of a much larger story. It goes back hundreds of years and it affects millions of people every day." The judge had given Marcus books to read about the history of discrimination in America, and Marcus was shocked to learn about things he had never been taught in school. Marcus discovered that his assumptions about people were not unique to him. They were part of patterns that had been repeated throughout American history. He learned about how black professionals had always faced extra scrutiny and doubt about their qualifications. He read stories of black doctors, lawyers, and judges who had experienced situations similar to what happened at the courthouse. The more Marcus learned, the more he realized how much he had not known about the experiences of people who looked different from him. He began to notice things he had never seen before. He watched how people reacted differently to black professionals compared to white ones. He saw how his own colleagues sometimes made the same assumptions he had made. Marcus also started paying attention to his own behavior in new ways. He noticed when he felt suspicious of someone and asked himself why. Was it because of something the person was actually doing, or was it because of how they looked? He was surprised to discover how often his suspicions were based on appearance rather than actions. One morning, Marcus saw a young black woman in a business suit walking toward the courthouse. His old instincts told him to watch her carefully, but then he stopped himself. He realized he was making the same kind of assumptions that had gotten him into trouble before. Instead of being suspicious, he simply nodded politely as she walked past. The changes in Marcus did not go unnoticed by his fellow officers. Some of them asked why he was reading so many books about race and history. A few made jokes about him becoming too soft or politically correct. But Marcus found that he did not care about their comments. He was learning too much and growing. Too much to be bothered by people who did not understand his journey. Marcus also began speaking up when he heard other officers make prejudiced comments or jokes. This was not easy, because he had been part of that culture for years. But he remembered Judge Washington's words about the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. "Guys, that is not funny," Marcus would say, when someone told a racist joke. That kind of thinking leads to real problems for real people. Some of his colleagues thought he had changed too much, but others began to listen and think about their own attitudes. The most important change in Marcus was how he interacted with people in the community. He started seeing everyone as individuals, with their own stories and reasons for being where they were. Instead of assuming people were up to no good, he approached them with respect and curiosity. One day Marcus saw an elderly black man sitting on a bench near the courthouse looking confused. The old Marcus might have assumed the man was homeless or causing trouble. But the new Marcus walked over and asked if he could help. The man explained that he was waiting for his daughter, who was a lawyer working on a case inside. Marcus sat with him for a few minutes and had a pleasant conversation about the man's family and his pride in his daughter's success. During one of their regular meetings, Judge Washington told Marcus about the changes people had noticed in his behavior. "Officer Marcus, several people have commented to me about how differently you interact with the community now. They say you seem more approachable and respectful." Marcus felt proud of this feedback, but he also knew he still had more work to receive. "Your Honor, I feel like I am just beginning to understand how much I did not know before. Every day I learn something new about how my actions affect other people." Judge Washington smiled and nodded. "That awareness is the most important thing, Marcus. The moment you think you have learned everything there is to know is the moment you stop growing." As winter turned to spring, the meetings between Marcus and Judge Washington evolved from formal lessons into genuine friendship. They talked about their families, their hopes for the future, and their shared desire to make the community a better place for everyone. Marcus had also begun volunteering to speak at police training sessions about unconscious bias and community relations. He shared his story honestly, including his mistakes and what he had learned from them. Many officers found his presentation powerful because it came from someone who had walked in their shoes. "I used to think I was a good cop because I was tough and suspicious," Marcus would tell new recruits. "But I learned that being a good cop means treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from." Judge Washington sometimes attended these training sessions, and together they provided a powerful example of how mistakes can be turned into opportunities for positive change. Their partnership showed that people from different backgrounds could work together to address difficult problems. On the 1-year anniversary of their first encounter, Marcus and Judge Washington met for coffee at the small shop across from the courthouse. They sat at a table by the window looking out at the steps where everything had begun. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "I know I have thanked you many times, but I want to say it again. You changed my life by choosing education over punishment. You could have ended my career, but instead you helped me become a better person." Judge Washington stirred his coffee and smiled. "Marcus, you changed your own life by being willing to listen and learn. I just provided some guidance along the way." He paused and looked out at the courthouse steps. "You know, I think about that morning often. It was painful at the time, but it led to something beautiful." Marcus followed the judge's gaze to the courthouse steps, where people of all backgrounds were walking up and down, going about their daily business. "Do you think other people can change the way I did?" "I believe most people can change if they are given the right opportunity and support," Judge Washington replied. "That is why I think it is important for us to continue sharing our story. Maybe it will inspire others to examine their own biases and work to overcome them." Marcus nodded in agreement. He had come to understand that his transformation was not just about becoming a better police officer. It was about becoming a better human being who could help create a more just and fair society for everyone. As they finished their coffee and prepared to start another day of work, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. He was still the same person in many ways, but he now saw the world with clearer eyes and a more open heart. He had learned that real strength came not from suspicion and control, but from understanding and compassion. The courthouse steps where everything began now represented something different to Marcus. Instead of a place where he had made his biggest mistake, they had become a symbol of redemption and the possibility of positive change. Every time he walked past them, he was reminded of the important lesson Judge Washington had taught him, that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from.